Paragraph, he begins with the diction of "I beseech you," and the beseech is a lot more of an earnest begging and imploring rather than a demanding. And then as he moves along, he urges the people to acknowledge the destruction or of their freedom and rights to do what they came to America for, freedom of religion, etc. And the last whole sentence is just an explanation of what the Crown has done, and Patrick Henry evokes a strong pathos, emotional kind of intent by reaffirming to the beliefs of the religious in America and how the Crown has ignored all sense of justice, and how sort of implying as well, or strongly implying, that their slights with the Crown of the more economic sense will be replicated with religious sense, as it was with assembly, as it was with everything else. And so Patrick Henry just asserts and demonstrates to the people his sense of urgency and betrayal from the Crown, and persuades his audience, which would be the religious peoples of America, to join his cause and acknowledge that they have been word for word insulted, disregarded, and spurned in an attempt to gain him on his side.
Henry begins the second paragraph by juxtaposing indulge with the phrase hope of peace. And earlier in the paper, Henry talks about how men often get caught up in the false illusions of hope. And so here he clearly states, using the negative connotation of indulge, that this hopefulness is wasteful. And he instead contends that there's no longer any room for hope because of the actions laid out in this parallel phrasing up here. There's no longer any room of hope. So this inductive movement of laying out the facts and then coming to a clear conclusion that there's no longer any room for hope and there must be an appeal to arms, shows Henry's honesty and direct voice as a leader. Next, he engages in the use of anaphora through these phrases of "if we," and this language "we" is very important because it unites the patriots together. And he then moves on to a use of alliteration through "inviolate those inestimable privileges," and this draws the reader's attention to how he understands the importance of freedom and how he feels that the patriots have a moral responsibility to engage in this noble struggle to keep their freedom. This noble struggle is part of the confirmation of how he explains that the actions of the British now require an appeal to arms. And then finally, Henry understands the importance of religion to the patriots. He understands Oz is very religious, so he appeals to God and hopes that it shows that his movement is divinely supported and that God is on the side of the patriots and they will need him if they are to win.
The audience in a demanding and authoritative voice. He discusses through fear-invoking tactics and parallel questioning the ways that the British would defeat them. He attempts to demonize the British by portraying them in a very negative manner. He asserts that the right side is with him. Through rhetorical questions, he asserts that the leader understands the content that binds him to his audience. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or the next year? These questions would excite and elicit an emotional response from the audience. Further, he attempts to use this content as frequently as he can because he creates an atmosphere of eagerness and undeniability, stating, "Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction?" A statement which further calls into question the validity of their resistance to the enemy. Additionally, he has the audience, his comrades, in a space where they are unable to respond to his criticisms of their inaction. He states, "Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot?" A repetition of the rhetorical questions used to help Henry bolster his argument that the British are the evil.